Why use Linktree when you can build your own link in bio website with Framer? In this video, I'm going to show you how you can build your own link in bio page from a blank canvas to publishing it live on the internet with zero code. Let's go. All right, so here we are inside a brand new Framer project. Now, the first thing we want to do is actually set up our sections and our anatomy of the project itself. So I'm going to press F on my keyboard and I'm going to draw a new frame, and we'll call this our section holder. And I'm going to set the width to be 100%, so it takes up 100% width of the frame that it's in, which is our desktop breakpoint. And then inside my desktop breakpoint, I'm going to turn layout on. Now, inside this breakpoint as well, I'm going to set the height to be auto, so it's essentially going to fit the content of the content or frames inside of it. So in this case, we've got a height of 624 pixels. Now, just for now, I'm going to size this up a fair bit, and we're actually going to set the background fill to be a black, since we want our link in bio to be dark mode, and I'll actually create this as a new color style called black. Now, next we actually want to create our container. Now, if you kind of consider a link in bio, everything's quite narrow. Whether you look at it on a desktop or on your mobile device, everything's basically built mobile first. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to draw a new frame that's going to sit inside our section holder, and we're going to call this our container. Now, we're going to set the width of this to have a fixed width, which means no matter what, it's always going to stay that size. I'm actually going to set the width here to be, say, 500 pixels. Now, if we preview this, you'll notice that it doesn't matter if I make my browser shorter or bigger, it's always staying at a width of 500 pixels. And for now too, we're going to actually set the height of this to be 100%. And inside this section holder, we'll turn a layout on. Now, what I'm going to do is inside this container here, I'm actually going to set the background to be white and just drop the opacity so we can see what's going on. And we'll actually make this our container, and then all of our content will sit inside here. So let's actually give it a nice bit of a radius here as well. Okay, so now inside my container, I actually want to add the content for my link in bio. So the first thing I think this needs is a profile picture of whoever's link in bio it is. So to do this, I'm just going to press F on my keyboard and draw a new frame on the canvas and make sure it's squared. And let's actually set it to be 100 pixels by 100 pixels. And we'll turn the layout on within this container as well. And we're going to set the distribute to be to the start. I'm going to make sure that everything is aligned to the center. Now, I also want to add a little bit of padding on the outside as well. So just for now, we're going to add some padding inside this container of 20 pixels, which is essentially this invisible border that surrounds my container. Now, inside this frame here, we'll call this our profile picture. And I'm going to set the radius to be as high as possible, so it is super round. And essentially any frame in Framer I can turn into an image. So I'm just going to press on fill, select image, and we can upload our profile picture. Now in this case, I'm just going to go to the Unsplash plugin here and find something that we can use as a placeholder. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now let's actually go ahead here and add some more content. So underneath our profile picture, we'll want a name. So let's call this Beck Framer. And let's make this text white here. And let's use Enter Display. Also size this up, make it a fair bit bigger. Let's go say 32 pixels. And let's make it bold. No, maybe that's a bit too much. Let's go semi-bold. Cool. Now let's also have a description or a title for Beck here. So we might actually have a social tag. So it might be at Beck Framer _12. And let's set the sizing for this one as well. So we'll make this a fair bit smaller. And let's actually reduce the weight here. And let's also decrease the opacity. Cool. So our link in bio is starting to take shape. Now, in this case, you'll notice that I since this container here has a layout on, if I want to increase or decrease the space between these elements here, you'll notice it's doing that with all of this. But in this case, what I actually want to do is have a different spacing between my profile picture here and the text. So what I'm going to do is actually select both these text frames. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go add stack. And you'll notice it's now inside its own frame. Now we'll set the width of this to be auto. And now, because it's inside its own frame or stack, we can now control the layout options directly inside of that frame. So we're actually going to reduce the gap here, and then we're going to increase the gap between my profile picture and my text block here. So we'll call this our title. Okay, cool. This is looking pretty good so far. So next, what I think we need is a bunch of social icons. So what I'm going to do is actually draw a new frame on the canvas here, and we'll keep this super rough for now, and I'll call this our social icons. Now this is actually going to hold all of our icons. So inside of this social icons holder, we're actually going to draw a new frame yet again, and let's actually set the width of this one to be 48 pixels. Let's go a little less. Let's say 40 pixels. And we're going to make it square, so we'll keep it as a height at 40 pixels too. And we'll set the radius to be, say, 6 pixels. Now, inside here, we actually want to add an icon. So I'm going to utilize some plugins here. So let's actually load up an icon plugin, and let's see what we can find. Cool, so I've used this Bootstrap Icons plugin, and I've searched for an Instagram logo, and I'm just going to drag that onto my canvas here. And that's quite big, so we'll shrink that down to say 24 pixels. And we're going to turn layout on. Now, inside this social icons container here, essentially we'll just remove that background for now. And we'll set the width and height to be auto, so it's automatically going to fit the content that is available. Now, inside this icon with this frame selected, we'll actually call this our social link. Now, what I'm going to do is do a little bit of styling here. So we'll actually reduce the opacity of that once again. And let's actually make this icon white as well. Okay, this looks good. Now, what I can actually do, because we want a few of these. Now, since everything's kind of set up inside its own holder, essentially, what we can do is we can just copy and paste these, and you'll notice that the layout starts to look how we might want it. But I actually want to go a step further here, and I actually want to create this as a component, because we're actually reusing this element over and over. We're going to have an Instagram page, we might have a Facebook page, a YouTube page, our LinkedIn, all those sort of links. So what I'll do is actually right click that frame, and I'll go create component, and we'll call this our social link. Now you'll notice it kind of takes us to the canvas here, which is pretty good. Now if I turn on my dark mode, we'll actually be able to see what's going on here. And essentially what I'm going to do is design a variant for each social platform. So I'm going to have one here, which is going to be called Instagram. Now, we also need this to be a link. So what I'll do is actually just make sure that the link is set up here too. So I could create this as a variable. So we'll just set that variable as a link here. Then when I go back to my homepage, you notice inside that component that's now being created, I can now set that link for that social icon. And the sizing's gone a little bit wacky, so let's just fix that up. So now what I can do is actually go and create a new variant here, and let's call this one, say, Facebook. And let's actually just delete this icon. And let's actually go find a Facebook icon. And let's just do one more here for now, and let's call this email, and let's actually find an icon for that. So let's size this down, and let's make it white as well. And then I'm just going to put this inside our component here, and let's delete that Facebook variant. Okay, so now we essentially have 3 variants set up, one for Instagram, one for Facebook, and one for email. And this just keeps our design system really clean, because everything's kind of listing inside this component, which means if I make a style change in here, let's say we want the border radius to be completely round on all of these, then it's going to update globally as well, which is handy to note. So what we can also do is set a hover state on these as well. So I might want to add a hover state here, and let's make it that the opacity is going to go up from 10% to 15%. And I'm just going to replicate this for the rest of them as well. Cool. So now let's copy and paste this a couple of times, and let's change the variants here. So one for Instagram, one for Facebook, and one for email. So for Instagram, that's going to link to our Instagram page. So you can just paste in a link here. Facebook will be the same. And then for email, how you can essentially do this is you can type mail to and then the couple of dots here. And then if you put your email, essentially what this does, it means that when somebody clicks on that link, it's going to open the email provider that's on their device and it's going to autofill for your email, which is super cool. So now you notice I can preview this and we also have a nice little hover state. And if I click on one of these, it's going to take me to that page. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Now we actually need to go ahead here and add some links. So what I'll do is draw a new frame on the canvas inside our container here. And I'm going to set the width to be 100%. And you'll notice it's not going completely to the border because we actually have this outer padding of 20 pixels. And again, we'll set a radius here so everything's kind of consistent. And we'll set a background fill of white with an opacity of 10%. Now, inside this little link card here, unlike Linktree, we can style this however we want. So what I'm actually going to do is draw a new frame and we're actually going to have a spot for an icon. So I'm going to go to the insert menu here. We're going to go down to icons and we're going to drag in an icon. And just because I love light mode so much, let's actually switch back. Sorry if your eyes hurt there after that. And let's actually go ahead and put our icon into place. Let's set the height of this to be 34 pixels. Inside this frame here, we're going to turn layout on to make sure it's centered. We'll add a little bit more of a radius as well. And let's also set our background color to be fill and drop the opacity so everything is still on brand. And we'll make the icon color white. Cool. Now I actually want to kind of use the height of this icon stack here, this sort of frame, to actually determine how tall this sort of card's going to be. So I'm actually going to set the height to be fit content, or aka auto, so it automatically fits that content. Then I'm going to add some outer padding of say 10 pixels, and we're going to set the distribute to be to the start. So everything's going to be left aligned. This looks pretty good. So let's go ahead here and add some more text. So I'm actually going to copy the text that I was using earlier. I'm going to paste that in and we'll call this our title. So this might be by my framer template. And we also might want to have a bit of a description down below as well. So underneath that, we might want to say on sale for the next 30 days. Now, again, we have a bit of a layout issue because this stack here, which we'll rename card, the direction of this layout is set to horizontal, but we want this text here to be vertical. So what we'll do is select both that text and we'll add that inside its own stack. And now that they're inside their own frame, they can follow their own rules. So we'll set the direction to now be vertical and set the alignment to be to the left. And now you notice that we kind of get the layout that we need. So let's go ahead here and do a little bit of resizing. Let's bring this down. Let's say that's going to be 14 pixels. And let's make this completely white, maybe slightly bolder, and this one slightly thinner. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Let's increase the gap here ever so slightly. And let's just change this icon because I'm just not a fan of it. There we go. Okay, so this is pretty good. The last thing I want to do is actually have some sort of arrow on the right-hand side to indicate that it is a bit more of a link. So what I can actually do is just copy this icon that I have here. We'll paste that on our card here and everything's kind of fitting nicely. And then we'll find an arrow and we'll make this a right aligned arrow. Okay, good, looks cool. Let's change the opacity here. Now, because we're going to have multiple links, similar to our social icons here, where we're reusing an element over and over, we're actually going to create this as a component so we can have a bit more control and consistency. So I'm going to right click this again, and we're going to go create component, and we'll call it card. Now, let's go back to our dreaded dark mode. The eyes. And now we're actually going to set this up. We don't need as many variants like we did in the social links here because everything's kind of following the same structure, but we will need variables for the text, the icon, and the description here. So I can select the text and you'll notice on these inside my sort of like component canvas here, on the right hand side in our properties panel, we have these little pluses. Now, anywhere there's this little plus, it means we can create a variable. And that essentially means that it's going to be editable on that instance of the component. So we can actually go plus, create variable, and for the plain text, and we'll call this title. We'll do the same with the description here. So we'll set the content to be another one, and we'll call this description. And we'll also have the ability to change the icon, which I can do here as well. So we'll set that to icon. And then lastly, we're going to actually need to make this a link. So we're going to go link, and we'll create that as a variable as well. Now, quickly, let's just take a look at this. So inside my actual page here, you notice we have this card component set up. And then inside the properties panel under the component, we can now customize those variables just based on this instance alone. So if I update something here, let's say check out my website. And we also change the icon here. You will notice it'll only change for this instance of this component, but it won't change globally, which is quite important. And this means we can essentially have the same card used multiple times on our site. And we can also add a link here as well. Now let's go one step further and let's add a hover state so we can make this look a little bit nicer. And let's actually say that on hover, we actually want this icon to move a little bit. So what we might actually do is set the positioning of this icon to be absolute. So we're kind of pinning it to where it needs to be within this card. And then on hover, we actually want it to move back. So we're actually going to move it from being pinned from 10 pixels to the right to say 20 pixels from the right. So it's actually going to push back. And let's actually say as well on hover that this sort of like background fill comes up ever so slightly to say 15 pixels. Now, if we preview this, you notice that when I hover, that background color changes and that icon technically pins, it moves. It moves back to the other way, which is pretty cool. So let's go back to light mode. There we go. A bit of a shock, I know. And now we kind of have our basic structure for our entire link in bio. So now what I could do is actually just duplicate and paste as many cards as I want. And let's say we had 5 or 6. And now we can start customizing all of these cards. Okay, so now we've customized all these link in bio links here, but you'll notice there's still a couple of issues that are going on. Firstly, we actually have technically a little bit of overflow here, and if I add another card, it's actually not showing at all. Now that's because inside our container here that we set up initially, we actually have a height set to 100%, which is determined by the frame that it's in, which is our section holder. So what we actually want to do is, let's start with the container here. We're actually going to set the height to be fit content. So the height's just automatically going to take the size that's required. And then we'll also do the same with our section holder. So we'll set the height again to be fit content. And now everything's fitting quite nicely and it's following the rules that we want it to, which means it doesn't matter if I have 3 links or 4 links or 20 links, we can make this as big or as small as we want it to be. So let's preview this once again and let's see how this is looking. It's looking pretty good, I'm pretty sure. Okay, and let's actually do a favor and let's just increase the gap of some of these elements here. But I kind of want these cards to almost be closer together. So again, we'll kind of wrap these inside their own frame. So we'll select them all and we'll go add stack. And we'll call this our card holder. And let's just keep the gap here of, let's go, yeah, about 8 pixels. Actually, let's keep it at 10. And then everything else we can just increase the spacing of. And let's actually take the icons here and the text. Let's wrap them inside their own frame. And let's call it our info holder. And then we can increase the gap of just these elements. Okay, fantastic. Let's also just do some more styling stuff here. Let's just quickly add, say, a bit of a drop shadow, so we can see what's going on, make it a little bit nicer. Maybe this is like some sort of like cool glossy gradient. Again, it's Framer, so we can customize and design this basically however we want. So let's actually make this a gradient and then drop it a fair bit of the way down. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. And now let's just preview this. And this is looking very clean. So the last thing we want to do is just make sure that it's kind of responsive. So on desktop, obviously the size is quite thin, so it won't really matter if we're on a big screen. because we have that container at a fixed width, it's always going to stay that size. But on mobile, that may technically be a little bit too big. So we just need to double check that. So I'm going to do one for tablet, which should just be fine. And we'll also create a breakpoint, which is our responsiveness for our phone size as well. And you'll notice it's going a little bit too big. But this should be an easy fix. All I'm going to do is set the width of this container to be 100%. So it's going to take up as much space as it can on our phone breakpoint. And we actually don't really even need the top and bottom padding if we don't want it. So what I could actually do is just remove that padding completely. And maybe inside this container, we actually just increase the top and bottom padding. So we might want 40 on the top, but maybe on the bottom, it doesn't really matter. And maybe we actually want to get rid of that radius here too, because we don't really have any overflowing content and we just kind of want it to take up the full page. So now when we actually preview this, you notice on desktop, this looks quite good. And then when I shrink this down, it's actually going to change the layout depending on the size. And it doesn't matter if I've got a really wide phone or a really skinny phone. This is now being a responsive website or a responsive link in bio. And then the last thing we need to do is just publish it to the internet. And just like that, you have built your own link in bio website, all in Framer and zero code. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you want more Framer content like this, consider subscribing to the channel because we're putting out new Framer content every single week. And if you are interested in mastering Framer, like truly mastering it, feel free to check out my A to Z course on Framer called the Ultimate Framer Masterclass, which is by far the most up-to-date place to truly master Framer. It's got over 100 lessons, 10 hours of content, and there's even a Framer plugin so you can learn Framer in Framer. But until next time, I'll catch you later.